So there's a lot of different planning software tools that you can get out there online, but I prefer the old pen and graph paper method, so that's what I use to plan out my bench work. This is my initial plan. You're going to notice that in reality it turned out just a little bit different because I made a few minor changes, but that's kind of common, I think, in this hobby. And once I made my basic plan out on paper, I wanted to visualize how it was going to look in real life, real size. So I taped it out on the floor just to make sure everything was going to fit the way I initially thought it was going to fit. I decided to create the bench work for the model railroad using 4x4 modules. And so I used just half-inch plywood for the tabletops, and I used 1x4 pine for the legs and the framework and the stringers as well. And here you see me cutting some of those. I wanted the tabletops to be 4x4, but the legs had to be 39 inches, so there's a lot of measuring and cutting involved. As I was making the frame for the modules, I learned that pre-drilling holes before you put the screws in goes a long way to stop the wood from splitting when you're putting the screws in. So that saved me a lot of work. That was a tip I learned online from another model railroader and turned out to be a good tip. Here you see me putting in the stringers once I have the 4x4 frame done. Now I've put in support stringers in the middle, and just about any design will do. You just want to make sure that this tabletop is going to be well supported. Between the stringers and then the legs that we're going to show you next, this tabletop's modular system turned out to be extremely sturdy. So I was very happy with the way it turned out overall. Once I got the modules done, they started to look like this, the framework at least. And then I would simply take that framework, add the legs to it, and put the tops on, and I'd be all set. Creating the legs was an interesting challenge because, again, there's several different ways that you can create legs for your tabletop. I chose what I think is known as the L method of legs. This is where I'm taking 1x4s that are 39 inches long and screwing them together, as you see here. And again, pre-drilled my holes first and then put the screws in. This L method of making the legs causes the legs to be extremely stable and sturdy. And I got to tell you that once I got done and I put everything together, this table is not going anywhere. It is super sturdy, and that's exactly what you want for an HO layout or O-scale layout, especially where you have heavier materials. So I was very happy with the way this was able to come together. Yeah, measure twice, cut once. That's always good advice. That turned out to be good advice for me as well. I made my share of mistakes when I was doing some of these, and measure twice, cut once is the way to go. Now that I've got the leg put together, it's time to put in the table leveler because you want to be able to level each leg. Nothing's going to be perfectly level. You need some levelers that allow you to adjust the legs so that your tabletop is exactly level. I took some 1x2s, cut them off into 4-inch lengths, pre-drilled a 1/4-inch hole right in the middle, and then just added these table levelers that I got at Menards. And you pop in, after you drill the hole, you pop in the screw insert, and the table leveler itself screws right in, and voila, you've got levelers. So I just had to make one of those for every leg. Once they were made, I would simply put them inside the 1x4s that I had screwed together. There's an important tip I learned on this. You see that little piece of wood at the base? I used that to make sure that the base of the leveler was exactly flush with the edge of the 1x4. And that's really important to make sure that things are going to be level and straight when you're assembling everything. I used a little bit of wood glue once I pre-drilled my holes, a little bit of wood glue to put the leveler assembly in. And I used just 2 screws and the wood screw to put them in. One screw I put kind of on the high side of the 4-inch leveler and the other screw on the lower side, so they're kind of at an angle. Between those 2 screws and the wood glue, again, very secure inside the leg, and you're all set. tighten them up a little bit, and voila, you've got yourself one leg with a leveler already built in, and works really, really well, as you're going to see. So all I had to do was make, it felt like I made about 40 of these. I don't think I actually made 40, but it is a little bit tedious. But again, it's once you get these things together, you start like a little assembly line, and it works great. So I started assembling my modules. Brought the module framework out once I got the legs in, and started putting them together. Now the way I joined the modules together was pretty simple. Put them together, the two edges together. I clamped them down to steady them. And again, making sure things are level and straight is imperative to eventually how well your track is going to lay and run your train. So this is a very important step. And so I just make sure that everything's level. And once it is, then I'm going to take a 1/4-inch drill bit, and I'm going to drill right through both of those edges of the frames that I'm joining together. And I'll take a 1/4-inch carriage bolt washer and a lock nut and just attach them that way. So what you can't see in this video is I'm putting in the carriage bolt on this end, and if you can imagine on the left side edge, I'll put a second one. So I'm using two to put them together. Another tip I would have for people is when you're doing this, when you're blending the modules together, connecting them together, don't over tighten the lug nut, especially if you're using pine, like a softwood like I'm using. You can over tighten it, that'll split the wood, and then you've ruined your module and you've got to start over again or replace the piece. So don't over tighten, just make sure it's snug. Double check to make sure it's level, and you are all good. And that's how you connect all these modules together. And this is what they start to look like once I'm putting them together. You can see how I made that change to the plan now. I've got that one module coming out on the side instead of up the middle. And this is what it looks like when it's all done and everything's locked together. Now the last thing before I put the tops on, I actually want to pre-drill some holes in the framing for the wires that are going to go down for tracks and accessories and the lights that I'm going to have on the train set eventually. So on either end of the framing, I'll just drill a 1/4-inch hole right through the framing, about a foot or so from the edge. And that's what I'm going to run my wires through. So it keeps the wires organized and kind of looping through the framing. Now the problem is that once you put the top on the base itself, it's pretty dark underneath there when you're trying to run your wiring. So I put a little magic marker around all the holes that I drilled, and that makes those holes easier to see in the dark when the tabletop is on and you're underneath trying to run your wires. That worked out really well for me too. Well, now that you've got all the wiring holes drilled, now it's time to put the tops on. And again, this is just the 1/2-inch plywood sheets that I was talking about before. And you'll notice here I'm pre-drilling the holes, but I'm using a countersink pre-drill. And that countersink drill allows the top of the screw to lay flush with the top of the wood, so you don't have any bumps, because once we get all the tops of the plywood on the benchwork, then we're going to add our foam. So again, you want a very smooth, level surface to add the foam, because you're going to add your track to the foam and you want a smooth, level surface for that. So countersinking the screws for that top is an important step. And again, double check your work as you roll along, make sure things are level, and it's going to be looking pretty good. So here we go. I've started in this shot, I've started putting some of the tops on, and I have to say, it's a work of art. It's looking good. Here's a shot of the complete top on. It's all complete, and now the next step is to put the foam on, the foam topper on, and that's what the track is eventually going to lay on. These legs, by the way, I put some 1x4s underneath the levelers so that the levelers wouldn't dig through the carpeting, because my wife informed me if I ruined this carpeting, I would be sleeping with my train set. So it was very important to do that, protect the carpeting. So that's why you see the 1x4s underneath the levelers. Okay, so here I'm using for foam, again, lots of different foam you can use. I chose to use this garage door insulation foam, very sturdy, and I use this power grab as the adhesive. Really works good. As you can see the little demo here I have, that foam is going nowhere once you glue it down with power grab. So the garage door foam, very light, very efficient, and very inexpensive. I had to trim some of it, so I just simply took a hot iron trimmer and was able to cut the foam, get some nice clean edges there. You'll notice there's a shiny side to this foam and a regular side to the foam, and the shiny, and that's because it's the garage door insulation foam. So I'm going to put the shiny side down, and I'm going to add my adhesive, the Power Grab, to it. This Power Grab product is so good that you don't need a lot of it. You'll notice that as I'm just going to go a little bit around the edges and then once down the middle. And once you flip this piece of foam over with the Power Grab onto the half-inch plywood, it immediately grabs the plywood. It gives you about a minute to reposition it, to center it if you need to. And then after that, in about 5 minutes, this dries hard as nails and that foam is going nowhere. It's in place. And again, you want everything nice and secure and level and so on, and that's perfect for this job. So there might be other products out there. I know Liquid Nails has a really good product as well, but that worked for me. When you're doing the cutting of the foam, sometimes you'll make, you'll have some rough edges there, but you don't have to worry about that. It doesn't have to be perfect because eventually you're going to be using these foam profile boards to go on the edge, and it's going to hide those little imperfections. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You'll be trimming things up anyway. And here's the finished product. I've got the foam all laid and secured down. And I must say I was very happy with the way it turned out. Made a few mistakes here and there that I had to correct, but again, that's all part of the hobby and part of the fun. So that's how I created the Benchwork. As you can see, it turned out looking really good. I was very happy with how it turned out. And what's up next, of course, the next step is to start playing with the track plans, and that's in the next video. See you then.